Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Solved, the show that's dedicated to mysteries, crimes, and thrillers. I'm Libby Hellman, and I'm your host, and this is part of the Author's Voice Virtual Book Signing Network. I am a crime thriller author myself with 15 novels out, but my guest today is catching up really quickly, and he's a fabulous author and a friend. And his name is Marcus Sakey. So welcome, Marcus.
Thank you for having me.
I am really excited to talk to you about your new book, which is called Afterlife. And it's kind of like a genre bender, people are saying, because you go across three genres. At least
three.
That's what I counted so
yeah,
far.
at least three.
Yeah. Before we start talking, I do want to remind everyone that you are welcome to call in or write in a question, and you just write it in, and right below the broadcast box that you're looking at right now, and give us your name and the city or the state that you're from so we know who you are. And if you would like to purchase a book, we would be really happy if you did. It's available both in hardcover and in trade paperback. The trade paperback is $15.95, the hardcover is $24.95, and the publisher is Thomas & Mercer, which is an imprint of Amazon. Okay, I think I've gotten most of the housekeeping out of the way.
Outstanding. Let's do it.
Okay, I loved the story.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's a really different kind of story, though. It starts out, and you think you're in a thriller, just a regular crime thriller, which, you know, of course, most of us really love. And then all of a sudden, both characters die.
Yeah. It's not every book that you get to kill your protagonists.
Yeah, like in the first 50
more than
pages.
Once. Yes.
Tell me about the story and how it came to you, and how you got the courage to write something where you killed off your protagonist so soon.
Questions of where stories come from are often really hard to answer. But this one I can answer. It came from a dream. A few years ago, I had this dream where I was wandering downtown Chicago, and I was all alone. And it's like the city was abandoned. Everyone had just sort of vanished. And then with that dream knowledge that you have sometimes, I realized, no, you're dead. Everyone else is still here. You're just dead. And it was okay. It wasn't a nightmare. It was just an interesting dream until I woke up. And I woke up and I was laying in bed next to my wife, my partner of 20 years, and I imagined being in the same place as her, the same city, the same house, and not being able to, talk to her or hold her hand. And then it became a nightmare, and the kind of nightmare that's like, well, clearly I have to write that.
So did you know? How did the story of the plot come to you? I mean, you had that image. By the way. The image of the first level of the afterlife, which is, and I'm jumping ahead, and excuse me, viewers, but it's worth it, definitely. Did you ever watch that series, Stranger Things?
No, I know of it. I had heard that there was some kind of similarities in some presentation, so I didn't.
So you didn't read it. That was
no,
probably
because
smart.
I was right at the
well,
process.
it isn't that they're dead, it's that they go into some weird dimension. But it's kind of like that first level of afterlife that you were discussing, that you discussed. It's kind of like colorless, or the colors are very muted, and things are not in sharp focus. And
Suckers ripped me off.
Yeah,
they ripped me off.
What can you do? Anyway, so go ahead.
To go from that dream to a book was a very, what's the word? Awful. It was an awful process.
I think you said it was a bitch.
That was the technical term. Yeah, I rewrote the first 100 pages of this book 9 times.
Oh my God.
So basically, I wrote 3 books for the price of 1. So it's really well worth you. It was really hard trying to find a balance between an upfront, compelling thriller that grabbed people and took you along on that, and then guiding you into my weird world and this myth that I was trying to create, and yet not having it be just creaky under the weight of that mythology. It was really a hard balance to find.
Mm-hmm. Well, you obviously found it, because I kept reading, and I really enjoyed Claire and Brody. I like them both. A
Thank
lot.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so the novel is, of course, about two FBI agents who are chasing a sniper who's terrorizing Chicago. I based it very much on the Beltway snipers in D.C.
Oh, really?
Very much
I
that
know that.
portion of it.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, the Beltway snipers just shut down Washington, D.C., the seat of government, ostensibly the brain trust of America. And it was completely shut down by two guys in a rifle shooting out of an old car. And I was fascinated by that, by the power that terror had. Because the odds of getting shot were ridiculously low, but it shut it down for millions of people. People wouldn't pump gas in their car without, except in gas stations where the whole thing was wrapped in a tarp. You know, they kept their kids home from school. And so I wanted that notion of this sense of random danger lurking out there and turning your entire world strange. But then I wanted to explain why that might be happening. And I wanted to take it a lot further than the usual explanations. I wanted to make a myth out of it.
You are one of the few authors I know who actually painted an afterlife. And I wondered how you came up with the stacking of the different levels. Was that something that came during the writing, or was it something you've always kind of believed? I mean, there's, Jews say there's 7 levels of heaven.
Right.
And I was wondering if you had any association with that, or if it was something completely different.
It's different. It's not that I would say that it's a deep personal belief, but what I wanted to do with this afterlife was have it be, let's call it in the zip code of science, familiar to someone who is science oriented. So the notion of, of attenuation, of things sort of fading away and the infinite gradations of that. And to take that and apply it to the afterlife was a really interesting notion to me, especially because I think we all sort of have this notion that when we die, we're going to get all the answers, right? If you're a religious person, then you have a very particular vision of it. If you're an atheist, you think, hey, it'll just be like going to sleep, and that's an answer too. It fascinated me to think, like, what if under certain circumstances you died, landed in a world, and still didn't have any answers, and had to make choices again about who you were going to be, especially in these somewhat harsher circumstances.
In that sense, some of the critics have said it's kind of like Ghost Story.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible. It's a romance where the characters are dead. You're going to draw connections there.
Yeah. Why did you have them go back and, okay, I don't know. I don't want to give away too much of the story.
Careful.
I know. But what happened, I guess we can talk about the first level.
Sure.
Because lots of stuff goes on. That's where the heart of the book is.
It is. And the book's called Afterlife, so I
Yeah.
feel like it's not a spoiler to let you know
Yeah.
people die.
Yeah, how did you come up with your description of it?
That was part of why I had to rewrite it so many times, was to find that exact balance. So partly the physical description, but more the rules and the tone and tenor of it.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, what it is that, and again, these people land here without any explanation. There's no angels explaining things or passing out instruction manuals, but people who died in a particular sort of way, basically very abruptly, with a lot of life force left, like, say, an FBI agent murdered in the line of duty, find themselves wandering a world that looks very similar to theirs. My book's set in Chicago, so they're in Chicago. It's exactly the Chicago they knew, except that this world is, they call it the echo. And the idea being that life, the living world, is the sound, and everything that follows is a fading echo. And so where they are now is always shrouded in clouds. There's no electricity, there's no fire. There's essentially no new energy here because they're in the echo, right? Echoes fade. They're already outside of the sound.
Right.
But what they have discovered, and some choose to live by and some do not, is that that energy can be taken from other people. So if you kill someone in the Echo, you absorb their energy and also their life story. You sort of live who they were, and in theory can go on doing that forever. And then that plays into later levels in the book that I think would be too many spoilers.
Okay, so it does keep, it is a thriller, and there are good guys and there are bad guys, and the sniper who killed all the people in Chicago suddenly shows up in the Echo. How did that happen? Did you know he was going to, or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely knew that he was going to. And I don't want to give away too much, but I was trying to make a myth. I've been fascinated by mythology since I was a little kid. I discovered this book of Greek myths when I was like 9 years old, and I just read them over and over and over. And what fascinates me about myths is that they can be true without being real, right? They can have a truth, they can speak to a truth without having any basis in reality. Personally, I don't believe the ancient Greeks actually thought the sun was a gilded chariot drawn by flaming horses across the sky. I don't buy it. These were very smart people.
Right.
But it was a story, and it gave them enough. They didn't have the answer. They weren't going to get the answer. Telling a story let them throw their arms around the void and define it a little. And that's part of what I was trying to do with this, was to answer questions, I mean, amongst other things, but answer questions about how some truly inexplicable awfulnesses can happen.
Okay. So there are a lot of interesting characters in the Echo, okay? And I wanted to ask you, aside from Claire and Brody, who are the protagonists, which character did you enjoy writing the most, and which one just gave you all sorts of problems?
Well, I mean, there's no question I had so much fun writing Edmund, who is sort of the arch villain, and
Right.
in ways that are difficult to explain. But the book actually opens with Edmund.
Right.
It opens with what
Him on a
feels
ship.
like, with him on a ship, yeah, with what feels like a ghost story intentionally, from about 500 years ago. And
Yeah.
he is a street urchin who's just never had any particular luck. Gets lucky enough to be on a ship. Lucky engineers by killing his predecessor, and is unlucky enough to have it be a wreck. And it goes into a very sort of well, like I said, it's a ghost story. But what was really fun about those was the language that I got to play with, intentionally writing in this very ethereal, slightly withdrawn, a more distant point of tone than I normally do. I normally try to be very, very close to my characters, to write as close third person as I can. And with this, I had a much more authorial voice.
Except that when you got into Brody and Claire, you went back to a close third person.
The vast bulk of the book is very close third and very recognizable. The Edmund sections, there's probably 20, 30 pages in the whole book.
Wow.
But they were really fun.
Yeah. And who's the character that you just had a lot of issues trying to get right?
Brody probably was the hardest.
Really?
Yeah, because Claire came into focus relatively early. The book is more than anything, it's a love story between these two.
So they meet. They meet during the course, the first 50 pages of the book. They fall in love right away, and it's wonderful. And then things happen.
and then I get involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
They met before the book had started, but not very much. It's a brand new relationship. It's got all that heat and fire. She is the assistant special agent in charge of the Chicago branch of the FBI. New to the job, she's very smart, very talented woman who's running the task force to catch this sniper. And Brody works for her, so they're having a very illicit relationship. But I loved Claire. I had a strong sense of her early on, and I wanted to find a Brody that was worthy
That
of
matched
her.
her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that matched her, but without just being without it being cartoony, or that that was worthy for somebody I could see her falling for.
I think you did, and it was Brody's. I liked Claire. I fell in love with her right away, but Brody grew on me. I wasn't so sure about him in the beginning. I thought maybe he was going to be one of those goggy FBI agents.
Yeah, big swaggery.
Yeah. And there was a little bit of swagger to him, but
I like a little bit of swagger.
Yeah. Well, we have a question, And we have a question from Bill in Kansas.
Hi, Bill.
And hi, Bill. He asks, is writing one of the myth stories, as you say, particularly difficult when you have previously written in the, quote, real world? Do you have to make changes?
I particularly love the quotes on real world. That's, I actually know exactly what you mean, Bill. This book was certainly an unusual book. I've written novels that were very straight-ahead crime thrillers that would be easy to shelf. This one is not that, it doesn't fit into a genre archetype. But no, that part wasn't difficult. It was very liberating. I mean, I started with my previous trilogy. First time I've ever written a series was the Brilliance novels. The first book was Brilliance, and that was the first time that I really sort of just started writing these bigger things, these sort of speculative thrillers, all rooted around an idea. And it was so inordinately freeing. It was such a rush of energy that, for me, while this is a very different book, this is the arena I'm going to play in forever.
You know, I have to say, when I started writing historicals, I felt perversely liberated.
Really?
Yeah.
That is perverse, because you have to get so many things right.
I loved getting everything right, but I loved, you know, I was creating a person in an environment. I knew the environment. I created the environment, but it was very freeing to have her do things, you know, that I didn't expect her to do. I don't know. I don't know what it was. So I get what you're saying. I like it. In fact, what I was going to say, and thanks, Bill, for your question. If anybody else has questions, please go ahead and write them in. What I love about you as a writer is how you've evolved. And you know, you started with the crime thrillers, and they were great. I loved each one of them. And then the Brilliance trilogy, which was a total departure, and now this, which is another departure into, I guess, speculative fiction. And you say you're going to play there for a while. What has there been? Why have you kept changing, or why have you kept evolving?
ADD. My first couple of novels were straight crime thriller, partly because I was learning how to write a novel, and so there are some tropes to work from and some structural
The first
abilities.
one, what was it, Danny?
The Blade Itself.
The Blade Itself. That was your first novel?
That was my first novel, and it could, oh, look at you. But, you know, it could have been an RKO picture, like two old friends from the old hood. One becomes a criminal, one becomes a normal citizen. And I'm very pleased with those novels. I'm very proud of them. But I think that I at least do my best work when I'm scared, you know, when I don't know if I can accomplish what I am hoping to, you know. And so pushing it is really important to me. It's really helpful. And then, frankly, my first four in particular were straight crime thriller. My fifth novel, The Two Deaths of Daniel Hayes, I call my gateway novel, because it's like it's getting a little metatextual, and I'm starting to do some different things.
Yeah.
And then with Brilliance, it's the first book I wrote that was truly rooted around an idea. The idea was that since 1980, 1% of the world's population are born savants, basically. And the question is, when 1% of the world is objectively better, what happens to the other 99 of us, and how do we react?
You oppress them, of course.
But that's pretty much what happens.
I know, I read it.
But for me to take that idea and then build that into a trilogy that explores it in the, you know, sort of the highest stakes, and be able to write scenes in the Situation Room, and, you know, have almost dystopian things happening, watching the world start to fall apart. It sounds really odd now that I'm about to say it, but it was really exciting.
No, I get that. I mean, sometimes, you know, you have your hands on the dials, and it's amazing what you can come up with. So your audience has changed. I mean, crime fiction or crime thrillers have a defined audience of mostly women, but there are some men. And they're a little bit older and a little bit more mature. And now it seems like you're writing for millennials. Is that who your audience is now?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I haven't gotten any sense that my audience has changed, or I haven't gotten a lot of emails saying that they hate what I'm doing. In fact, I feel like they've mostly followed, which to me was enormously liberating because I was scared doing that with Brilliance. I'd worked hard to kind of start to build a brand, but then I thought about it as a reader, and I'm a reader first. And there has never been an author whose work I loved. It's like, well, I won't read that because it's a Western.
Yeah.
You know, like if I love the way the person writes, if I love the way they tell a story, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not actively trying to write for anyone, except, I mean, the way I think of it is entertainment for smart people.
No, I guess I'm a smart person because I love it. You've met some really good friends in the business, and
starting with you,
of course,
from way back from the beginning.
Way back when we had the outfit.
Before my first book was published.
That's right. We got you and Sean in there, and they play a role. They're your readers, your beta readers, right? And your
yeah, it's
how does that work?
It works great, except when one of them's sick or something, and we can't work together.
Yeah.
I work very closely with two writers in particular, which is Sean Shirkover and Blake Crouch. We all came up at about the same time, and we get on the phone, and honestly, we kind of chatter like schoolgirls for hours at a time, and we story break, and we plan beats, and we help each other through.
That's so great.
It's enormously liberating, because when you're writing, I mean, you know this, it's not the forest for the trees. It's I mean, it's the bark. It's you are right up to it.
Yeah, you know, I've been in a writers group, or I was in a writers group for 20 years, and I just withdrew because I'd gone through an evolution where when I started, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
And over the years, I had become the person who was critiquing other people and teaching them what they didn't know. And
that's an awkward position.
It's awkward, and it wasn't it wasn't giving me what I needed. So
Sure.
I'm trying to create a little bit of a group of writers that I show my stuff to.
It's really helpful to have somebody else who just understands the rules and speaks the language and can offer fresh perspective.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? Oh wait, before we go there.
Okay.
Whoa, there's a whole area. You were writing the screenplay.
I am right. That's two questions in one, actually.
Well, what our listeners, our viewers may not know is that this was scooped up by a major film company in Hollywood before it even came out, right?
Yeah, that was a good day.
That must have been a great day. It's Ron Howard's group.
It's Ron Howard, yeah. So the book sold several months in advance of publication to Ron Howard and Brian Grazer and Imagine Entertainment.
Just fabulous.
I just like saying Ron Howard and Brian Grazer. I could do that all day.
I can see why.
But I mean, apart from the joy of saying Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, and apart from the fact that they're literally two of the best in the business, they have experience translating books, and sometimes very weird, complicated books. So to me, that's a real point of comfort to me, because I am writing the screenplay for this, and I wanted to.
And did anyone say, no, you're just a novelist, you can't write a screenplay?
That may be behind my back, and they may already be planning my replacement. No, they were very welcoming to the idea, and I think partly because this is it's a particular vision. I mean, I'm scared and delighted at the same time that I get to do this.
Now, in the screenplay, are you going to have to describe, let's say, the echo as succinctly as you did in the book, or do you leave that to maybe the special effects person or the director of photography?
A bit of both. What I will be trying to do is write scenes that explain it in fun visual ways, rather than give exact descriptions of what it looks like. Because the hope is that whomever they end up choosing to direct it, it's somebody who's turned on by the visuals and who has an idea of like, okay, I read the book and I see what Sakey was doing, but I've got this whole other look that we could do, and that's great with me. I mean, to me, the part I'm most excited about is the notion of that kind of collaboration, of something that I wrote being worked on by tremendous artists, you know, from the director through to the cast. I mean, if I write a line of dialogue and then let's just say Emily Blunt, because let's just
say
say
her.
Emily Blunt is
Sure,
playing
why
Claire.
not?
And I get to see Emily Blunt murder a line that I wrote. That's going to be a very happy day. Now, Emily Blunt has no idea of the book or
Yeah.
my existence, but let's just...
Okay, well, I can see that. What about the people that are going to rewrite your version, and you know there's going to be
It will be
several.
perfect the moment I finish it.
Of course it will be. But, you know, what
It's-
if the person that takes it over from you, because they've written, 5 screenplays
Sure.
before, butchers it?
Well, I hope they won't butcher it. The best you can do in film is work with people you trust to really get the book and get the idea, and I feel like I have that with Imagine. I am almost certain that there will be other people working on the script, and frankly, I welcome it. I'm excited to get a chance to at least be the first to cast these ideas into a screenplay form, and I'm
excited for you. That's just very cool. So what comes next after you finish the screenplay? And
Bourbon. After I finish the screenplay
lots of
comes
bourbon.
bourbon.
Right. And then what do you do?
Then I start
There's
a new
no-
novel.
There's no sequel to this, is there?
No.
I don't think so.
I
Yeah.
left it all on the field on this one. And that was actually important to me from the beginning, was as I was rewriting it 9 times, was this sense of anytime you start writing a book, it's this shimmering perfect ideal until you type a word and then it just comes crashing down to the
Right.
ground, and that's the way it is.
That's what I say. It's when it's in my head, it is the best book I've
It's
ever written.
so good. I
And
know.
then-
And
then when
I wish we could trade our shared head books. That
Right.
would be...
And then when I start writing, it becomes the blankety blank manuscript.
Yep.
Because it's never as good as what I thought.
It never is, but there are certain ones where you rein yourself in, and then there's this one I was like, I would rather swing really hard and miss than bunt on this one. Because I feel like bunting on this one would have been a really bad choice.
You did a great job, and we're going to wind up, but I do want to encourage everybody who's watching to get the book. And one thing I didn't mention is it got a starred review from Booklist, it got a starred review from Publishers Weekly, it got a starred review from Kirkus. What happened to Library Journal? I'm sorry. He's the only author I know who's gotten 3 starred reviews for the same book at the same time. So you know it's got to be a great read. So do buy a book, just push the button underneath your screen, and Marcus will stay here so he can sign a book for you. So make sure that you give us your name, and we'll get it right out to you after the show. And let me just kind of talk about what's coming up on on the Author's Voice, the virtual book signing network. On August 8th, Lady Bird and Friends returns to speak with Jan Gilchrist Spivey about her illustrations in the book, We Are Shining, by Gwendolyn Brooks. This new release is in celebration of the 100th anniversary of the birth of Gwendolyn Brooks. I didn't know that. It's going to be a beautiful show, so please tune in again. On August 10th, Lit with Love meets with Meredith Duran to discuss her latest novel, The Lady's Code of Misconduct. It's a helpful guide to behaving as badly as you dare. When life hands our heroine lemons, she simply seduces a rake, ruins her reputation on purpose, and finagles a way to get her inheritance back. It's just all in a day's work, right? All your educational needs and more are here at Author's Voice, so come back to authorsvoice.net for updates and details as we get closer to those dates. And thanks for tuning in. Remember, you can still get some signed books from Marcus. And for this edition of Solved, I'm Libby Hellman. Thanks for watching.